What were you talking? Who was the talker?
I was a talker.
What was your passion?
Skiing.
Skiing, awesome. Did he label and mirror?
He labeled a lot.
Labeled a lot?
Yep.
Did he mirror?
Yes, once or twice.
Okay, mostly labels, cool.
Mostly labels.
Did he come out of the labels? Did he ever do anything wrong?
There was one time where I think he said it feels like that kind of tripped me up in in the pattern there. But for the most part, it was pretty solid and got me off the X, if you will.
How was it for you?
Felt very natural. I didn't feel like anything. I didn't feel like it was artificial.
Awesome. Okay. And all right, so the labeling and mirroring, I don't know how much practice, how much opportunity you've had to practice up to now. I don't know how many reps you've gotten in. I get a sense from what you were telling me before. You've been applying a book, so you've probably been labeling and mirroring some.
Yeah, that's accurate.
How was this how was the exercise?
It was good. It really felt like a natural flow of a conversation with, somebody tells you something about themselves and then suddenly he's off and running into way different. It's not about skiing. It's not at all about skiing.
What did it become?
Well, if I go to the deep dive, right, he's trying to develop that camaraderie he developed through skiing that he didn't get from team sports, where he could be individual, but he could be with friends, where he developed lifelong relationships, and now he's at a point in his life where that's once a year. He wants to be able to develop that in a community he lives in.
Okay, now how long thank you. How long were we in the exercise, roughly? 3 minutes, maybe. Now, based on what you just heard about these two gentlemen, this gentleman right here, how many of his core values as a human being and as a businessman do you know? Lifelong relationships, camaraderie, team player, a critical part of his life. So these quickly uncover issues in very short periods of time that drive relationships, which means friendships and business relationships, yes? And, I did a keynote with the Apollo Private Equity Group just a couple of days ago here in town. And they were like, well, can't you still go play golf? And I said, all right, so you guys go play golf together for what? To find out what we just found out in the last 3 minutes. Only instead of being on a golf course for 8 hours, it took 3 minutes here. So this is why, and some of you are discovering this already, this is why your professions accelerate. You begin to dial into people very quickly. And you create a great relationship between the two of you, and it takes 3 minutes. And I can tell you something, every single time that Brandon and Derek do the exercise in front of the group, I learn more about Derek. And I've known Derek since 2001. Is that when we first met, probably, roughly? And I'm learning more about him every time. Thank goodness Brandon's good at this stuff, huh? So this is how it's applied. And those of you who are still getting your reps in to get over your awkwardness, you heard a gentleman here describe what it was like to be labeled in an environment where he knows he's being labeled in an exercise, in a room, at a seminar. And he said it was natural, it was comfortable, it was fine. If you have any misgivings about these skills at all, this environment should tell you when your counterpart is completely good with it and they know you're using techniques on them. You will never encounter a person that you're talking to that's more aware of the fact that techniques are being deployed on them in the moment and everybody here is okay with it. So it's not that you're using a technique, it's what your objective is, to create a better relationship. You should never be concerned about whether or not they don't like the techniques. If somebody on the other side doesn't like the techniques, it's not because the techniques have shortcomings, it's telling you that there's a pretty good chance this is someone you don't want to do business with. If someone is openly telling you they do not want to collaborate with you, what are they telling you? If I'm communicating to you, I don't want you to know about me.
Back here, we had a comment, they don't trust you.
They don't trust you. Yeah. All right, so there's an interesting thing too. Now, if they don't want you to know these things, now your further diagnosis is uncover what the trust issues are. Now, maybe you're never going to get past it, but that's a great observation. It's a trust issue, and the flip side of that might be that once this person trusts me, they trust so fully and so completely, that's why they're so defensive. So how hard is it going to be to get on the other side of that wall?
So labels have a very specific structure. You're going to be saying, it seems like, it sounds like, it looks like, it feels like. You can use it or you can use you. It is neutral. It's where you should probably stay when you're starting to use the skills because it is neutral. You can use you, and it's definitely more engaging, but if you're not really very careful about the tone of voice that you have, using you cannot go very well for you if you're not careful. So you can say, it seems like you're angry, or you can say, you seem angry. The you that I just said was very accusatory. People don't respond well to that. So it's better if you just stick with it in the beginning until you're dealing with somebody who you know for sure feels a certain way, and you can say it without that little sarcastic kind of accusatory tone in your voice. Now, when you're using labels, actually, I don't know why we just have this on the label slide, because it's using any of our skills. Do not use the word but after you say something, because it is an erasing word. So everything you say after the word but erases everything you said before it. So if you say, you seem angry, but you really don't need to be. You just erase that perfectly good label by saying the word but. If you use the words and or because, you're actually either explaining the label or you're stepping on it. So what you need to do, instead of actually putting one of those words in there after you use a really good label or even after a mirror, you want to just go quiet. Okay. Let the person process what you just said. Don't erase it or explain it right away. One thing I want you to remember through this process is if you are explaining, you're losing. Okay. So when you use our skills, you don't want to explain them. You want to drop them. It's like dropping the mic. You just put it out there and let it sit. Okay. With a mirror, you're repeating back the last 1 to 3 words. You want to be careful, not go more than 5, because if you're getting up there in numbers, you're looking more at a paraphrase, and it's no longer a mirror. So it can be from anywhere in the conversation, but this does take practice. If you're listening to someone and they're going on for, 3-4 sentences, and you hear something that you want more information about, you mirror that specific thing. Okay. It's not an issue. It doesn't break someone's train of thought because they already brought it up. So they already have it in their mind. What you're doing is, if they're giving you 3 or 4 different issues and there's one particular one you want to talk about, you go that direction with your mirror. And that's a way that you can kind of control the conversation and get the information that you want. You want to use labels and mirrors and get as much information as possible from the other side while giving as little information as possible away about yourself. That's the best way to practice. It's also not mirroring body language. Now, I don't discount any body language. It has its place, and I'm pretty sure Troy's going to bring up my coffee drinking here in a second. But if someone that you're talking to rubs their nose like this, a lot of times you'll rub your nose because somewhere in your brain says, why are they rubbing their nose? Do I have something on my face? Or they do something with their ear. So you'll do something with your ear. A lot of times it's unconscious. Okay. It's a very unconscious thing that people do. But we're not really talking about mirroring body language, because in the world that we came from, we were on the phone with people. So we weren't able to really see body language. So it's not that we don't put any stock in body language. It can be extremely important. It's just not the most important thing. And we're not talking about mirroring body language. So we're not telling you if someone crosses their arms, you cross their arms, you cross your arms. We're not telling you to mirror that body language. It can be kind of fun to kind of mess with it though, because a lot of times if you do something, people will see it and they'll do it also.
I want to get into.
Well, I get something I want to interject for at some point in time.
Oh, no, go ahead.
I get a lot of questions. I've always, not a lot, but there's always questions from guys. Can we use labels and mirrors and tactical empathy in dating, in our personal and our social lives? And I'm hearing this rumor lately that more women are using it in their personal lives with men in order to gain the upper hand. And I don't know if there's anybody that could speak to that, but I'm sure there is something.
There's a woman in the audience who I had dinner with tonight who was asking for advice along these lines with the guy who she's dating. And after dinner, I just sent her the link because this is exactly what she's looking for to apply it in that situation.
All right, very good.
Chris, I have something to say. Sorry, I just sound like I smoked a pack of 12 cigarettes. I recently, being that we met in real life, I was like, I actually need to read his book. And I was texting Nicole that I was taking notes, and I wish I had read this book a long time ago, but I kind of was like, I want to see how this would affect me in relationships. And recently there was a couple of dates that I went on with men, and nothing really bad happened, but it kind of fizzled out. So, or maybe they weren't being assertive enough, or they would make plans, or they would get busy, or they would cancel. So there was one point in your book where you talked about sending out an email, and it wasn't rude, it was just direct, but you would gain an emotional response from the person. And I believe the email said, have you given up on this project? So I told Nicole, I'm going to try this. So what I did was I catered it to some of the men that I would have loved to went on another date with. So I said, hey, have you given up on wanting to get to know me? And the strangest thing happened is every single one of those men responded to me, and they started telling me how they felt. And I would say back to them, I'm sorry, you were really busy. And I would try to get them on the phone because I think talking on the phone is better, but I slowed down my tone of voice and I just kind of presented it back to them, and it worked. And guess what? I have 2 dates next week. So I'm trying to use it for the good. But Chris, you're getting me more dates on the book. So thank you.
Congratulations. You're using your powers for good and not evil.
Thank you.
This is exactly what I'm talking about. You know, you think you're reading a book on business negotiation because that's the category that it's in, but you're really learning how to communicate and how to get life to go your way. And that's something we all want. And like I said before, it gives you a sense of agency and control, and that makes you feel good, and it's good for your mental health. So Chris, I love that you brought that up. And Brianne, I love that you're actually using this in your dating life. It makes me so happy, and honestly motivates me to do it as well. I was telling Leah Lamar, who's on the stage with us, when I saw her Saturday that you were doing some of this stuff, and she's like, wait, I need to learn. We all need to learn. Also, welcome Rembrandt and Leah to the stage. So grateful to have you.
Remember, you don't get in life what's fair, you get what you negotiate. If you want to become a better negotiator, click the link in the description below.
This video is about labels, the ultimate negotiation tool. Sometimes we think of it as the ultimate MacGyver tool. What makes it a MacGyver tool? Well, a MacGyver tool is really simple and incredibly effective, ridiculously effective. To do your labels right, you got to keep them simple. Stick to the format. It seems like, it sounds like, it looks like. You seem, you sound, you look. We have a great negotiator that loves to say it feels like. Stick to that simple format. We're intentionally leaving the word I out. I is a thought interrupter, a pattern interrupter. When you use the word I, it draws attention to yourself. It interrupts the other side's thinking, and you're using labels to gather information. We know from negotiation that you add this to gather information. The crazy thing is, asking questions is not always the best way to gather information. Labels work well more of the time than asking questions do. Labels trigger stream of consciousness reactions. You might say to somebody, what are you thinking about this? You might label them instead and say, seems like you're giving this a lot of thought. Or it seems like you're thinking about something here. Or it seems like you saw some things you like. Either one of those is going to trigger a much more unvarnished flow of thoughts from the other side. One of the people who's really learned this stuff and is doing a great job of applying this in the real estate area calls it unlocking the floodgates of truth talk. Happens to be a woman that's applying this,
and seeing the insights, and not the least bit surprising because women have a tendency to pick this stuff up faster than men do. That doesn't mean men can't be great at it also, just that for whatever reason, women seem to get a head start on understanding this and applying it really quickly. This is emotional intelligence-based negotiation. One of the crazy things about this is that when Brandon and I brought these hostage negotiation techniques out of hostage negotiation into the business world, we didn't think labels were that big of a deal. I can tell you now that we both use them so much that we can work our way entirely through a negotiation only using labels. When you get good at them, you respect their simplicity, and you apply them, you can use them all over the place. One of the main things that makes labels incredibly versatile is the fact that all three types like them a lot. We've done a lot of polling. We've got a lot of reason to believe that the world pretty much breaks up into three types: assertives, analysts, and accommodators, across the board, regardless of gender or ethnicity. We probably polled at least 2,000 people in this regard. We got a fair amount of data. And in polling all these people, and in different classes where we've taught, we frequently run exercises where we ask them, of the 9 negotiation skills, which skills would you most prefer your counterpart use with you in order to make a great deal with you? All three types pick labels as number 1 or number 2. So while you're still trying to get a feel for the other side and draw a bead on what type they are, labels will always be your highest percentage shot at the very beginning when you're proceeding. And then if you find out that they resonate really well with labels, you just simply stick to them. It's your safest bet, and the way you go from being barely good enough to get by to being a superstar is just by increasing your odds a little bit at a time. Labels increase your odds. Get good at them, practice them simply, practice every day, get your reps in, and they will serve you well. How much practice should you get in? An hour a day. Make an hour label hour. Label at noon. Label over lunch. Label from 7 to 8 every day, whatever time it is. Get your practice in. Make a cheat sheet of labels. Keep it by your phone. Your cheat sheet should especially include labels of negative dynamics. Fill in a blank. It seems like you hate X. It seems like you dislike X. It seems like X is a problem for you. Have those fill in a blank labels by your phone. Have them ready. They will serve you well.
All right. So ghosting is a problem, but I think one of the worst problems, especially whether it's sales or deal making, which is what I'm in, stay in touch, right? The prospect, the other party, they want you to stay in touch. You don't stay in touch enough, you become forgotten. If you stay in touch too closely, you are annoying. Any suggestions on tactfully or tactically staying in touch and making sure you're moving the needle with them?
Yeah, so their last words to you or stay in touch? What's the prompt here?
Yeah, usually it's this question I get asked a lot. So it's usually we're in long sales cycles, pretty complex deals. They tend to like you, whatever, but they're not ready to move forward with the negotiation, the deal, the contract, or whatever. Stay in touch. They're not saying no, which I'd rather they ghost or say no because then we can move on. But stay in touch. So what would be a couple of ideas you might think of how to stay in touch?
No. Let's rethink this. First of all, that's the same as a maybe, and you got to treat maybes as if they're no's. So that's the way you got to proceed. Now, if they're saying stay in touch, it's either a flat no, they're not going to do it, or they have misgivings that you're not revealing. So you know that to be true. Like, are you keeping your percentages, your win rate percentage, your length of time to an outcome, and your percentage of successes on your stay in touches?
A percentage of stay in touches to success, yes. We call it more of a pull-through yield, meaning deals we put in the pipeline to success ratio, it's really high. It's about 85%. But
right,
this is more
you answered my question. Hold on.
Yeah.
Stay in touch as a category only. you can tell me what percentage of the stay in touch people, let's call them a zebra or a giraffe or a thoroughbred. I don't care. They're one profile. Stay in touch. Can you tell me what percentage of those close and how long it takes to close? Yes or no?
Yes, I could. Yes, I could. Yes.
Okay, so can you, so first of all, it's not a sin to not get the deal. It's a sin to take a long time to not get the deal.
Correct.
So if they're saying stay in touch, what do you know to be true?
That they're not saying no, they're somewhat amenable to terms, but whether it's timing or pressure or something on their side that's not motivating them to be enough to turn the dial to let's sign the retainer.
All right, so they have misgivings, or they lack pressure, or they don't see the immediate value. Nobody says stay in touch on something that they see immediate value to. Right? Otherwise, they'd execute. Either if they see immediate value to it, or if they have pressure to execute, they'd execute. So
good
the
point.
response is going to be a label. Stay in touch. Sounds like you have misgivings.
It's a good point.
Stay in touch. Sounds like there are other things that are pressuring you. Now, they're going to be much more likely to talk with you about the barriers than they ought to talk about what's going to hook them. Because people are comfortable talking about what's getting in the way because they don't feel there's a commitment involved. So they're free. I'm free to tell you what the barriers are. It's up to you to solve them. If you want to say, well, what would it take to make this deal? I don't want to say that because it's going to back me into a corner. So you want to focus on the barriers instead. And you probably want to go after that with labels. So I would never, you know, and I got to tell you something. Nobody in my business development team goes into stay in touch mode. And a lot of what we've learned will be inspired by, similar to Jim Camp Start With No, 2002 book. I worked with Jim. We collaborated over a lot of stuff. Me and his sons. Jim has since deceased. Their whole approach was to get somebody to make a decision, yes or no. But every conversation was designed to make a decision, and stay in touch is to avoid decisions. And it's a maybe, and it's never Neverland, and you cannot monetize maybe. To some degree, you can monetize we're not making this deal because then you can move on. So I would never go into stay in touch mode. I get stay in touch. What do you know to be true? You know they don't see the value right now. You know they're being pressured in other areas. You know they have misgivings. You know those things to be true. Throw it out with a label, focus in on that. They're going to be much more likely to talk with you.
I like the take on that. Very good. I love it. Thank you. You're a rock star, man, but you know.
That was a great question. Thank you very much for the question.
Thank you. Pleasure.
Is labels. So labels have a very specific structure. You're going to be saying, it seems like, it sounds like, it looks like, it feels like. You can use it or you can use you. It is neutral. It's where you should probably stay when you're starting to use the skills because it is neutral. You can use you, and it's definitely more engaging. But if you're not really very careful about the tone of voice that you have, using you cannot go very well for you if you're not careful. So you can say, it seems like you're angry, or you can say, you seem angry. The you that I just said was very accusatory. People don't respond well to that. So it's better if you just stick with it in the beginning until you're dealing with somebody who you know for sure feels a certain way, and you can say it without that little sarcastic kind of accusatory tone in your voice. Now, when you're using labels, actually, I don't know why we just have this on the label slide because it's using any of our skills. Do not use the word but after you say something because it is an erasing word. So everything you say after the word but erases everything you said before it. So if you say, you seem angry, but you really don't need to be, you just erase that perfectly good label. by saying the word but. If you use the words and or because, you're actually either explaining the label or you're stepping on it. So what you need to do, instead of actually putting one of those words in there after you use a really good label, or even after a mirror, you want to just go quiet. Okay. Let the person process what you just said. Don't erase it or explain it right away. One thing I want you to remember through this process is if you are explaining, you're losing. Okay, so when you use our skills, you don't want to explain them. You want to like drop them. It's like dropping the mic. You just put it out there and let it sit. Okay. So what exactly are labels? So labels are essentially verbal observations. They are whatever you're seeing or picking up from the other side. So it could be their motivations, the circumstances that they're in, the dynamics of the situation that you're both involved in. It could be their emotions. It's you interpreting. So when you're using a label, you can do what we call a surface label, which is what's presenting. In other words, usually what's presenting when you're dealing with someone else is whatever emotion that they're feeling. Because a lot of times you can see it in their body language, you can see it or feel it in what they're saying. So if you label that surface element, it's not a bad thing to do, but it's better if you can use a deeper label, which is trying to maybe get to the why behind the behavior. So say you have a friend who is arguing with their spouse. And so when you start talking to them, you say, it seems like you hate arguing with your spouse. And then their thought is, well, yeah, of course I hate arguing with my spouse. Who doesn't hate arguing with their spouse? That was a dumb thing to say. Instead of going for that surface label, which is not horrible, go for a deeper label and say something like, it seems like you get irritated when you and your spouse don't see eye to eye. It's just a little bit deeper. It doesn't take much, just a slight shift to get you from the very surface, you hate arguing with your spouse, to the deeper kind of why behind it. Seems like you get irritated when you and your spouse don't see eye to eye. Okay. You can label negatives or you can label positives. If you label negatives, it actually diffuses them. Shh, knock it off, Mochi. If you notice something negative that's happening in the room and you ignore it, it's like not pointing out the elephant that's right there that everybody knows is there, but no one's saying anything about it. And if you leave it there, it just tramples around everything. If you point it out, if you just go ahead and say, there's that elephant in the room, you're going to actually diffuse it. You're going to mitigate it. You're going to take away its power. So labeling the negative is not a bad thing. I mean, you can talk about someone's emotion as being negative. You know, wow, it really seems like you're angry. And if the anger is something that's kind of clouding what's going on with you and your conversation, and you see that, you can label that. It actually just points it out, gets that negative out there, and actually then diffuses it. One of the reasons it works so well is because you're demonstrating an understanding of the other side. Okay, you're letting them know that you see this negative thing, and then you're helping them kind of diffuse it. You can label positives, and that actually reinforces them. And this kind of goes along with neuroscience, basically. If I'm dealing with my daughter and she goes out with her friends and she comes home and I realize that she's in a really, really good mood, I'm going to label that. I'm going to say, seems like you had a really good time with your friends. And what happens when I say that is she goes back to that point in time where she was out with her friends and she was having a really good time. And it releases endorphins and gives her this little sense of euphoria. So it's reinforcing that positive time that she had. And it's bringing up all these nice positive things. So when you're labeling that positive thing, it's actually reinforcing it. Okay, so it's kind of important for you to have what we call a go-to list of labels. This is going to help you be able to use the skills without having to think quite so hard about it. Because when you first start using this stuff, it's kind of difficult to just think of something on the fly. So if you have 3 or 4 or 5 labels that you can kind of interchangeably use, a lot of them will be good in almost any situation, and it'll help you practice, because in order for you to actually form a new habit of using these skills, you have to get between 64 and 67 repetitions before you start paving that neural pathway that actually helps you use these without having to think about it. Okay, so it does take a lot of practice. So this go-to list has some of our favorite labels on it. One that's really, really good that you can use pretty much anytime is, it sounds like this is important to you. Another, it looks like you've given this a lot of thought. And here's the one that you use if you're at an impasse with someone, you've reached a position in the conversation or negotiation where things just don't look like they're going to go forward very well or very easily or at all. You can say, it sounds like there's nothing I can do to change your mind. By saying that, you're opening the door for them to tell you if there is something you can do to change their mind. That's when they're going to let you know. Okay. So if you feel like things are just like you hit a brick wall in this conversation, you can throw that label out there and see what information they give you back to kind of give you an idea of where you can go or if you can go. So this next one is my favorite. Seems like you have a reason for, and you can put a lot of different things in here, saying that, thinking that, feeling that, doing that. It's pretty much this all-encompassing label that you just stick the verb in there that you need, okay? One of my favorite things to use this for is if someone asks you a question that you're either not sure about answering, you don't know what the answer is, you don't want to answer it, any of those things, you can say, it seems like you have a reason for asking that. And this is an important one because people really ask lousy questions. And they do it for a couple of different reasons. One, because their brain works a little bit differently than yours, and they feel like they're asking a great question, but to you, it doesn't make any sense. Or to you, it sends you to a different direction. So you start answering this question and you're explaining this answer for 10 or 20 minutes, and they come back and basically say, that's not what I was asking. And then they ask you a different question, which is really what they wanted to know. And then you can get to the real question, but now you've wasted 10, 15, 20 minutes answering the wrong thing that they really didn't want. So if you're ever unsure about the direction someone's trying to take you in by asking a question, or you're not really getting what they really want from the question, then you can just throw out there, it seems like you have a reason for asking that. And then they'll tell you the reason that they asked the question, and it'll basically tell you exactly where to go with what information they want. Okay.
Sandy, we have a couple of questions come up. Do we want to go back to the label questions?
Sure, they have label questions, sure.
Okay. So one question is from Ivan. I'm not sure. I hope that's right. So she's asking, can you use it when negotiating promotion? So she said, for example, seems like you do not feel like I'm ready for the promotion, or seems like you would prefer this person get a promotion and not me. So she's wondering what the best way to use that would be without being pushy.
I think both of those labels are appropriate. Labels can be used in any situation, just about, okay? As long as you're using a good label and you're not labeling something that's going to come across as, rude or purposely to make someone defensive, I think you're going to be fine. Every personality type, every negotiator personality type responds well to labels, okay? All three of the types, accommodator, assertive, analyst, all of them like labels. So no matter who you're dealing with on the other side of the table, a label will be fine. Just monitor your tone of voice. Make sure you put it out there very, matter-of-factly, especially with what was the first label again? Seems like you do not feel like I'm ready for the promotion. Right. So soften that up just a hair and say, seems like there may be a feeling that I'm not ready for this promotion. That way you're not singling out that one person that you're talking to. And instead of saying, it seems like you don't feel like I'm ready for this, it seems like there may be a feeling that I'm not ready for this. That way you're not pointing specifically at that person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I would just, if I can add something real quick, Sandy. For example, if you're wondering like, why am I not being promoted, right? You can use a label to try to understand that as well, right? Like, seems like there's something impeding this promotion. Seems like there's something, right? Like there's some kind of obstacle. So you can address that, and then you'll get to the bottom of maybe why you're not getting the promotion in the first place. One more question. Sorry, that fluffed. Okay. There's one, what if you're clearly being disrespected? So like if someone's like staring at your chest, for example, instead of talking to you in your actual eyes, face. She said, for an example, seems like you're being a pig. Is that a bit harsh?
Yeah, that's a bit harsh. You want to point it out, but you don't want to point it out by actually calling them a name. So what might be better is it seems like something in our conversation is distracting you. And in other words, I know that you're distracted by this and you shouldn't be distracted by this. So I'm going to point out that I know you're distracted, and maybe that'll bring your eyes up where they're supposed to be. So remember, you're not just actually labeling how you feel about them. You're labeling the dynamics of the situation. So if you have someone that's constantly looking at your chest, you can say, it seems like you may be a little distracted. Because then when you're looking right at them and they look at you and they know they've just looked up, they're going to be like, oh, caught red-handed. So, and you might even follow that up with another label saying, it looks like we need to kind of regroup and get back on track and, do it that way. But be careful being quite so blunt and honest. Look for more of the situation that's happening there and kind of label that. They know what they're doing. Okay, that pig knows what he's doing. He knows he's looking at your chest. He's not stupid. He knows he's looking at your chest. So when you say, seems like you may be a little distracted, and you're looking right at him with a question mark, like, are you distracted? And he's going to look up and realize that he just got snagged. Okay, so you want to point it out, but you don't want to, and this is the problem that some women face. When you speak up for yourself, you're automatically categorized as an assertive bitch, and you shouldn't be. So using the labels in a more subtle way will break away from that. And keep in mind, using labels is cumulative. In other words, it's not a one and done skill. Sometimes you have to do it 3 or 4 times to get an idea across. But if you stay in the proper mindset, if you stay curious about why are they acting the way they're acting, and it may be because they're a pig, but you don't necessarily want to point the finger at that right away. They're that way because that's the way they feel like they can act somehow or another through their life. Somewhere someone has given them the permission and told them that it's okay to do that. You don't have to put up with that. You can call them on that. You can say, seems like you're finding something else more fascinating. And I mean, look down like you know where they're looking, and you don't have to point out and say, stop looking at my breast, and be obvious about it. But you can basically put out there, it seems like you're too busy focusing somewhere else. Looks like we need to refocus on what we're doing, and just be a little more subtle about it. Do it with a smile on your face. Stay in that accommodator voice, because then it's not threatening to them, and you're not going, seems like you're too busy looking at my breast, because then they're going to get defensive. And when they get defensive, you're automatically a bitch in their eyes, even when you've done absolutely nothing wrong. So the way go ahead.
Sorry, Sandy.
No, go ahead.
No, yeah. I mean, to that point where it's like, okay, I, hate the idea that like we always have to be smiling or whatever, right? Ultimately, it's just when you're attacking someone. So if like you're essentially calling that person a name, it's just always going to be counterproductive. Does that person deserve it? Sure. That's not what we're talking about, right? Of course they do. But the problem is, it's like, if I want to have a working relationship with this person, if it's going to be more beneficial for me in the long run, which most of the time it is, then I need to understand how to actually make this productive. And so calling out behavior rather than name calling is going to be the more productive route.
Absolutely.
And then Dion had a question, which is, how is it bad to come across as bitchy?
Bitchy, I'm not going to say that it's never okay to be bitchy, because I mean, I'm bitchy a lot. I'm just going to be honest with you. It just has to be done in an appropriate place, in an appropriate way. And when you're in a business negotiation situation or dealing with something at work, you can regulate yourself. You can control yourself and how you act and what you say. You cannot control the other side and what they do. However, you can have an influence on them by the way you use your tone of voice, by the way you hold yourself, and by the way you project yourself. So if you are dealing with someone on the other side of the table who is assertive, if you go at them assertive, which pretty much is bitchy, clash, and you're not going to be able to work it out. Okay. The best way is to go to tactical empathy first, figure out why they're acting like they are. And most of the time it's just because they're being a jerk. So you have that and you understand that. So when you understand that, it's going to help you center yourself a little bit more, not react to that piggish behavior, and instead label that behavior and try to divert it a little bit. Okay.
If you unmute and fire away at Sandy.
Hey, Sandy. Thank you, Chris and Shay and Kayla, for having us today. I am wondering if you can shed some light, Sandy, on, as a woman in the workplace, I found that a lot of times if there's a tough situation and your tone stays good, but you're still dealing with in a tough manner, that as a woman you can come across and really be labeled as being bitchy. Right. Instead of just tough, where a guy with the same tone in the same situation would just be, everybody would just say, hey, he did a great job, he took authority or whatever. And I'm just wondering if you have any recommendations on how to avoid that label and still come across well.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I actually hear this quite often. Women say something that when it comes out of their mouths, for whatever reason, it seems more assertive. But when a man says it, it seems to be taken okay. If you're controlling your tone, which it sounds like you're doing a good job of controlling the tone, a lot of times it's the structure that you're using. With the skill that you're using, make sure you're using the right structure. So if you're using a label, if you're trying to find out information, instead of asking a direct question, use that label with a nice tone. It might get you a little bit further. If you're having the overall problem, say, in a meeting or in a negotiation or in a tough conversation, try using an accusations audit first and mitigate that negative. You can say, you're probably going to think what I'm saying is very assertive. Pause for a few seconds and then say what you're going to say. Because if you put out there, they may think you're being assertive. You're demonstrating that you understand that they have that thought process going on in their mind. And when you do that, you mitigate it. You clear it from their mind. So they can't come back in a few minutes and say you're being too assertive or you're being bitchy, because you pretty much told them up front you thought they were going to think that anyway. So it mitigates that thought, keeps them from using that against you later in the conversation. So a lot of women that I've spoken with have had this issue. And when I suggested to use the accusations audit before they speak, it actually gave them a little bit of a leg up, and they found that people were not considering them quite as assertive because they were putting it out there first.
Thank you. That was really helpful. I do have one other question, if it's okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
What is your biggest recommendation for helping with times when you have tone issues?
Okay, tone is something that you deal with from the day you're born, I think. I remember when I was younger, my mom saying, watch your tone of voice. And I would think, I don't have a tone. And when I look back on it now, I'm thinking to myself, oh, I so had a tone. When I was that teenager, I definitely had a tone. So trying to get a hold of your tone of voice is something that takes a little bit of practice, especially if you're trying to go into that late night FM DJ voice, especially if you've listened to Chris do the voice on the masterclass, because the tone of Chris's voice, when he goes down into the late night FM DJ voice, it has a whispery quality to it. And as a woman, you want to avoid that whispery quality. It sends the wrong message. So instead, what you need to concentrate on is kind of practicing with your diaphragm. And especially when you're in a stressful situation, because if you sit up straight and you elongate your diaphragm and you tilt your chin up just a little bit, your voice tends to get a little bit higher. And I'm doing it right now as we talk. If you can tell, your voice gets a little bit higher. So when you want to go down into that late night FM DJ voice, you want to shrink down into your stomach a little bit and lower your chin, and your voice is naturally going to drop a few octaves. And if you notice, that's what I just did. So to get into that late night FMDJ voice, drop your chin, let your body fall down relaxed, and then slow down your rate of speech. And that's the way you're actually going to get to the late night FMDJ voice. That is an appropriate place for women to be with it. Now, if while you're doing this late night FMDJ voice, you get triggered a little bit, you just have to remember to maybe tighten your core, because if you tighten your core, your abdominal muscles, it'll keep you hunched forward just a little bit, which will help you control that tone and keep it down in a lower octave.
Absolutely. And speaking of the negotiation 9, how are asking labels more effective than direct questions in real estate?
That's a great question. So an asking label in the Black Swan Group, an asking label is essentially picking out the emotion, the dynamic, and verbalizing it. It's using your intuition. And in real estate, and this kind of connects to the unfortunate problem that we have in this industry of getting to yes, where everybody wants yes. So we all just strive for yes. If we do that 2 millimeter shift and we instead look for the dynamic and identify it and articulate it and ask, we'll get so much more information back. So if I ask my client, or the other agent on the other side, is a 30-day close okay for you? That's quick. I'm triaging. I just need to know. I need to get to the yes. Is this going to make the deal? Yes or no? Instead, if I say it seems like your client would prefer a quick close, I'm engaging them in a way that, and I need to be aware of my tone there. It seems like your client would like a quick close. I'm engaging them in a way that implies I need more information. And so we tell our clients here at the Black Swan Group to start small. So for all the agents listening on this call, this is scary. This is uncomfortable. Start at Starbucks. Don't start with that deal that you want. Start with the barista. It sounds like you're having a rough day today. And just listen. And then when he or she tells you how they're feeling, label what they tell you and just see what kind of information you get back. You're going to be astounded by the information that you get. Then start using it at your open houses. Start small, and then they work.
And here's what I wanted to throw in on top of that with the asking label. The power, the power in the asking label is that it doesn't provoke the same defensive responses that a direct question does. There's a full third of the population that hates direct questions. You want to shut them down, you start peppering them with questions, and you're going to be well on your way to having them close off to you. They feel like they're being interrogated. They feel like they're being pumped for information. So it's not a heavy lift for you to take whatever, what, when, why, where, how question, turn it on its ear and make it a label. Instead of asking your counterpart agent, why haven't they signed the contract yet? The shift would be, it seems like there's a pretty good reason as to why they haven't signed yet. It carries an entirely different tone, because going back to what she said earlier, this is one of the most emotional transactions that take place in anyone's life. It's replete with negative emotions. Negative emotions impede people's cognitive ability. The more you allow those negative emotions and dynamics to persist, the dumber you're allowing your counterpart to remain. And all of us, regardless of what the conversation is about, we want the person on the other side to be as cognitively nimble as possible. So we're working overtime to mitigate those negatives. And part of that process is, let's change those direct questions into asking labels. And you'll be amazed at how much more information you get when you ask a question in a label form. And it's not, all you have to do is think of the label. It looks like, it seems like, it sounds like, and then upward inflect at the end. That turns it into a question, and you're going to get a more candid and robust response from the other side. Sorry, Marcel.
Derek, no, I think you brought up a fantastic point. Unfortunately, in our industry, there are agents that are under a significant amount of pressure and are trained to be assertive. That's how you make deals. You got to get in there. You got to, best and final. I'm not going to answer the phone, whatever it might be. Just get it done. If we address the underlying dynamic, we're invoking reciprocity. It is catching them off guard. They're being dealt with differently than they've ever expected or they're used to. You're going to get responses, and it might be guarded at first, but if you continue to use these skills, we have a 93% success rate in hostage negotiations in life or death scenarios for a reason. This transition into the private sector is showing similar success rates because they work, because it's based in human nature. And so, the power of reciprocity goes a long way, and just showing some tactical empathy it's amazing.
You know that in each culture is different. Now that we have one of our members that it's from London, it's different. They make jokes, and sometimes for us it's difficult to understand those jokes.
Mm-hmm.
Because for them are really funny, and for us they may sound a bit rude. So
Right.
I would like to know, like, how does this work on culture and language and countries and
Right. So this is taught in hostage negotiation around the world. So these skills work no matter what culture you're in, no matter what language you're speaking. I will add a caveat to that, because sometimes when you're in a different language, the wording might not translate exactly the same. So you have to work a little bit to make sure that you're conveying the same message that we're saying in English. I know I worked with a Canadian one time who was French speaking, and he had a hard time with some of this stuff because of the way the labels sounded when you said them in French. So we had to kind of come up with a little workaround for him, and he was able to do it just fine. But hostage negotiators all over the world use this stuff with great success. They use it on anybody. And the reason why it works that way is because we're dealing with human behavior and emotions. So it's the human nature response that we're speaking to when we use these skills. So if you are coming across the right way, if you are coming across with the proper tone of voice, and you're using the skills as we describe them to you, you shouldn't have an issue with it. Now, there are some things, and when we get to accusation audit, you'll see what I'm saying, but you do a list of accusations audit at the beginning of a conversation.
Yeah, I mean, to Sandy's point of being able to kind of stop inappropriate jokes, right? Whether that's gender bias, because I saw that in the chat, Lisa said too. Whether they're gender bias jokes, inappropriate cultural jokes, right? That people think are okay, right? That's kind of why this label is great. You can use it for several different things, right? If someone's making a joke, an inappropriate joke about your culture, you can say, it seems like you think it's okay to joke in that way, right? Or it seems like you thought that was an appropriate joke to use with me, right? And it gets them to stop, and then they have to report for their behavior, essentially.
One that works a lot too is my favorite go-to label, seems like you have a reason for. So you can go with, seems like you have a reason for thinking that. Seems like you have a reason for saying that. Seems like you have a reason for feeling that way. Or if someone asks you a question that you're not really sure you want to answer, because people do ask lousy questions, and you want to make sure you know where this is going before you give an answer, you can say, it seems like you have a reason for asking that. Then they'll explain to you why they're asking, and then you'll know exactly where to go, and it'll save you time in the long run. But that seems like you have a reason for label also works with the inappropriate behavior, especially when you're just kind of creating the thought pattern interrupt. Because if you say to someone, if they've said something off color or inappropriate to you, or tried to take the conversation in a direction you don't want it to go, and you say, seems like you have a reason for saying that, and you just go silent and then let them think about what they just said, And I've had this happen before where they realize it and then they say, "Oh, I'm so sorry." And then they realize how they've kind of stepped over a line and they will back off of it. And it's better for them to get the hint from you and back off of it so that you don't have to go to that very assertive, pushy label, like when you completely address the behavior. It seems like you think it's okay to call me that or to refer to me that way because that's more assertive. So this seems like you have a reason for it is a great one to kind of fall on in almost any situation, because you just put that verb in there, looking, feeling, saying, whatever it is, and it'll work with that label. So is there anything in the chat that we need to address?
No, I think we're just chatting in the chat. So
okay, it's great. It's where that
Great.
chatting is supposed to happen.
Yeah.
All right. So we have labels. We've talked about labels, how you use them, but why? Okay, why labels? Why are they one of the fabulous 5 for us? They play to our intuitive strength. Women are really good at picking up on the underlying dynamics of a conversation. You're much better at discerning the why behind. Part of that is because women are good listeners. So you can listen and you can get sometimes a double meaning from things. And this is why women sometimes, when you're in a conversation, when it starts going off the rails sooner than other people in the room, because you're able to see those dynamics and how things are going. And, I blame some of that for how women have been treated all through the years, but you see when the car starts going down the wrong road. Okay. And that's a horrible thing to say, because don't we always yell about men for never asking directions? And I just use that. It almost sounded like a pun, but you just have an ability as a woman to observe and get the feeling for those dynamics that are underneath the situation that's happening. So that's why labels really do play to us, because we can label that dynamic that someone else in the room might not be able to see. This also allows you, when you use a label, to take that deep dive. Okay, you can deep dive down into someone's psyche, and it doesn't feel as intrusive. So this allows some space in the conversation that keeps the other side at ease. And Davey, if you want to speak to that, because
because here's the thing, labels, anytime you have a question in your mind, you can turn it into a label. And that's kind of what we recommend doing, actually, is because a lot of people can feel threatened by questions. And they feel like, oh, you're interrogating me. Like, have you ever gotten that, right? Like, oh, am I in an interrogation? You're like, no, that's called a conversation. But the thing is, you can just you can label instead. And that's a really great way of, no one's going to be like, oh, I'm in an interrogation. Just turn it into a label. So let's say that you were thinking, okay, I really want to know more about where this person is at with the deal, right? So you're thinking, okay, I want to ask them, okay, how long do you think it's going to take to talk to your team about this, right? You can say, it seems like there's kind of a process to talk to your team about this. Like, it might take a couple of weeks. And then they end up telling you everything that you wanted to know. But exactly. they're still at ease because you're not asking them a question.
And this does speak to being able to get information from the other side without feeling like, one, you're interrogating them, 2, you come across as threatening, or 3, you come across with that mom feeling, you know what I mean? That, like, your mother, why did you do this? Where are you going? What's happening? You know what I mean? So you don't want people to feel that from you. So you can get information by using a label instead of a question, which is how we gather the information, just like Davey said. And you don't come across as threatening in any way, because let's face it, powerful women do come off as threatening sometimes. And it's not a good way to be, because when you come off as threatening, it really turns off the other side, because one of the main things that helps our skills work is being likable. Coming off likable One of the ways you do that is by avoiding direct questioning and using labels to gather information so that you do come across less threatening.
Now let's dive in. Number one, Black Swan go-to label is, it looks like something just crossed your mind. Number two is, it seems like you're uncomfortable with that. And number three is, it seems like you're hesitant. Now, these are broadly categorized into being used for what scientists would call affect shifts. What's an affect shift? Change in body language, change in tone of voice. Somebody looks down, somebody looks up, somebody looks to the side. Affect shifts. Now, the tricky thing about this is you don't know for sure what their change in body language actually means. Like, they could be lying, they could be uncomfortable because they've given you the best deal they already could. There's a whole variety of reasons. What you want to do is find out what's behind the change in the affect shift, the change in the body language, the change in the tone of voice. It's pretty much like finding out what's behind the question. Before you proceed, you want to make sure that you know. So the first three labels are for changes in affect shifts. Number four, it seems like you have a reason for saying that. Or you could give it, it seems like you have a reason for saying that. Notice the two different changes in inflection, two completely different impacts, two different ways to do the same thing. Number five, very similar label. But instead of for saying that, we're going to focus on their action. It seems like you have a reason for, and then you label the action, doing that. It seems like you have a reason for doing that. We had a contractor one time talking to a subcontractor says, seems like you have a reason for not finishing the work. Subcontractor didn't finish the work, needs to find out what's going on behind not finishing the work, and so he just hangs a label on the action. Seems like you have a reason for not finishing the work. Now, interestingly enough, any one of these could be mislabels. Mislabels are fine. What did the contractor say when he did what did the subcontractor say when he ended up doing the label, which he was just doing it genuinely? He said, "No, really, I don't." That's one of the magic things about labels. Mislabels can give you more information than maybe the label could have in the first place. So this broad category here, second category, for our next couple labels we just did was labeling behavior or statements that you're uncertain of or even that you think might be wrong. So here's what I want you to do so you can reach your full potential as a negotiator. First, go to our website, blackswanltd.com. Now, look over here, put your cursor on resources. Put it there, highlight it, go to free ebooks and guides. We're now in resources. Scroll down. You can see 5 negotiation tactics for dealing with difficult people. Download it now. Click on that. Here's a description of what you get with this guide, and it's free. So, yeah, we want your email. We want you to reach your full potential. Put in your first name, your last name, your email address, and click on the stuff that you think is how you can advance, how you're going to get better. You'll be glad you did. Now, back to our video. Now, number 6 is a great label to use at impasse, or when you're at loggerheads, or when you can't get past where the two of you are, and you don't want to make a concession. You shouldn't make concessions. Don't make concessions. Never split the difference. So here's a label to use when you're at impasse. It sounds like there's nothing I can say to get you to change your mind. Or it sounds like there's nothing I could say to get you to change your mind. Now, this came up in a negotiation. Wasn't the first label that the person using it used. He'd been labeling for a while. He'd been very interactive. He'd been building rapport, been using tactical empathy. So, of course, situation drives strategy. You're at the end of a negotiation. You're an impasse after you've made a great deal of really good effort to try to make the deal work. Last-ditch effort to snatch victory from the jaws of defeat. If you've approached with tactical empathy the entire way, it seems like there's nothing I can say to get you to change your mind. What happened in this negotiation? Since it was a genuine effort the entire way, the person on the other side said, no, as a matter of fact, here's what I want. And laid it out and they made the deal. Next, here's a ridiculous one that black swans on our team are using on a regular basis. Very counterintuitive. It's at the opening when someone says to you, how are you today? Of course, it's in a business conversation. They've called you and they said, how are you today? Here's what the super sharp black swans are saying in return. It sounds like you have a place you want to start. That's crazy, right? Yeah. But if they called you, they got a place they want to start. And how are you today is really they're checking to see whether or not you're prepared to start where they want to start. They put preparation into this conversation. So this really cuts to the chase. 2/3 of the time, actually more than that, the other person is relieved and they jump right into it. You've built rapport, you've jumped to the heart of the matter, they're relieved, you saved a massive amount of time. Now, every now and then, somebody really cares how you are today. They care in general. And when they do, they're going to say, all right, we'll get to that. They're going to be nice and friendly about it. But how are you today? Because they really want to know. Then you can exchange those pleasantries. Most of the time, the exchange of pleasantries is just to see if you're ready to get down to business. You can get down to business and be friendly and build rapport all at once. And this is a great way to do that. So that was number 7. Sounds like you have a place you want to start. Next category for when they say the price is too high. This is our number 8 go-to label. It seems like the value's just not there for you. Or it seems like the value's just not there for you. Notice the first one was a downward declaring tone of voice. And the second one was the upward inquisitive, genuinely curious tone of voice. Same words, land completely differently. Feel free to experiment with both. Look, if the price is not right for them, it ain't about price. It's about what they're getting for the price. Don't cut your price. Pivot into the value conversation. Find out what's going on the other side. Use the label. If it's an effective label, if it's accurate, they're going to tell you that it is. If it's a mislabel, then they're just going to test your price. They're going to pivot back, and you're going to know that too. Either way, you shouldn't be cutting your price. You should be making the deal better. That's one of the ways the black swans do this stuff. Next category. Labels for what we refer to as proof of life. What's proof of life? Is there a deal, and is the deal with you? Those are 2 tricky issues. Number 1, they could be doing due diligence. They're not going to give you the deal. Number 2, they could be looking for free consulting. They're not going to do the deal. Number 3, you're the rabbit. They're looking for you to drive the price down on the favorite. You're the fool in the game. If you don't know who the fool in the game is, it's probably you. How do you deal with this? Proof of life. Is there a deal, and is the deal with you? We got 2 great labels for you to use here. This first one, number 9, is kind of a tricky, different way to tee up your label. Instead of it sounds like, it's going to be it doesn't seem, or it doesn't sound. It doesn't sound. Notice the difference in the beginning. So, number 9. It doesn't seem like you're ready to make a commitment. Or, it doesn't seem like you're ready to make a commitment to us. Could be done with an upward inflection. It doesn't seem like you're ready to make a commitment to us. It doesn't seem like you're ready to make a commitment. Again, downward and upward inflection. You get a lot of fake negotiations. There's a fair amount of data out there that says that 20% of your opportunities are fake opportunities. Since we've been teaching proof of life to people in the Black Swan method, we found that the numbers are typically much higher than 20%, may go up as high as 80%. You got to feel it out a little bit. This is an effective label. This is appropriate. You should be prepared to use this label in the first half hour of the first conversation if you're gaining a sense, based on our methodology and teaching, that you might be the fool in the game. This is completely appropriate to do that, and that was number 9. Now, get ready for number 10. Number 10 is, it seems like you're still shopping around. Or, it seems like you're still shopping around. Again, I gave it to you with both of the inflections. And this is one of the values of our YouTube videos. Again, these are appropriate if you're sensing that there's a proof of life issue in the deal. And if they're mislabels and they're not still shopping around, or they're not ready to make a commitment, people love mislabels because it gives them a chance to jump in and correct. No. We're ready to make a commitment. No. We're not shopping around. Mislabels are great at uncovering the truth, because when you mislabel, the urge to correct is overwhelming. It's one of our laws of negotiation gravity. So don't be afraid to mislabel. Now, of course, you're not doing it on purpose. Actually, sometimes people do mislabel on purpose. But there's no problem with mislabeling as long as you're trying to get it right. All right. That was our list of top 10 go-to Black Swan method labels. Guys, we're talking about mirrors today. Jedi mind trick. The last 1 to 3 words are the important 1 to 3 words. Listen to these examples to see how crazy it is that this stuff works. The quickest, easiest, simple bailout skill that will never fail you, never fail you. Especially when you're thrown off, when you're off track, when you've lost your emotional bearing. Mirrors are there for you. They work with the least amount of brain power. That's why they're always there for you. So we're preparing for one of these trainings in a very early day. No, it wasn't one of these trainings, but it was our training in our very early days.
Yeah, corporate training.
And we're supposed to put together notebooks. Actually, we're supposed to put together 3-ring binders. But in my head, those terms are synonymous. And he's putting this stuff together. And I asked him if he's got the notebooks ready. And he knows we're supposed to be putting 3-ring binders. And I'm saying notebooks. He doesn't know what's in my head, actually. You know, are you thinking something like this when I say notebooks? You know, who knows? Basically. But, you know, this could be this is not a 3-ring binder, is it? This is not a 3-ring binder. I don't know. I don't know what's the matter with him. I don't know why he can't read my mind. But anyway, so I say, are the notebooks ready? And he goes, what do you mean by notebooks? So what do I say? Goddamn notebooks. Yeah, exactly. Goddamn notebooks, right? You say it's much clearer then, right? Because the word notebook is so self-explanatory that if you don't understand exactly what I mean because I choose my words so well, then you're an idiot. It's the same way I ask for directions when I'm in Paris. What do you mean you don't know where the Eiffel Tower? Where's the Eiffel Tower? You know, I only say it again louder. So he mirrors me. He goes, notebooks? I go, yeah, 3-ring binders. And, you know, that's why the mirrors are the great bail you out of the corner tool. Somebody's not on the same sheet of music. It's either you or it's them. A quick mirror always causes people to restate it another way. It's especially effective with assertives because we figure if you're unclear, we just need to talk more.
This is Chris again.
How are you?
Hey, listen, I got a couple of questions I need to ask you. We've got a van out here, a blue and gray van. We've been able to get a handle on the owners of all the vehicles out here, except this one in particular. Do you know anything about it?
Well, other vehicles not out there because you guys chased my driver away.
We chased your driver away?
Well, when he seen the police, he cut.
Right on. Thank you, Chris, for everything. This is fantastic. My question, going back to what you were discussing earlier about you're shooting somebody a message, with mirroring, and because so much is about body language and inflection. So just in the use like a sponsorship package. So you've had a meeting with somebody. They said, you left us, we're going to follow up. He's like, I got to take it back to my team. You follow up a couple weeks later, say, hey, no response. And then you shoot him a text or you shoot him an email and saying, it's like, are you no longer interested in the sponsorship? And, one, does that come across sounding desperate when there's no inflection or just out of the blue? And then part two is if they respond and with a simple, no, we feel the price is too high. Now, if you and I were saying this in person, you're like, hey, the price is a little too high. I might come back with, well, too high. So when it comes to the type of communications through text and email, you don't have the inflection, and I don't want, how not to sound like a parrot, I guess.
Right.
Would be the question.
All right. So whether or not you sound like a parrot is really more about you. It's not about you. Mm-hmm. Now, you do have a bit of an instinct here for that texting occasionally, you can't control tone.
Mm-hmm.
So, we got something we call softeners, which principally softener most of the time is usually, I'm sorry, I'm afraid. So where to mirror that, I might say, I'm sorry, ... too high, ? That's throwing a little bit of a softener in the beginning.
And this also comes from me. I mean, I'm now doing more sales for our events, and I've always said I'm not a salesperson. Well, I had to change my philosophy and say I am a salesperson. So I've been checking out the masterclass, and it was fantastic, taking my notes, and then coming to this. I just feel, and this is me, but I feel it's like if I just wrote I'm afraid ... too high, it's like that is so outside my comfort zone.
Yeah,
that I'm like, just going right back. It's like too high. Like, how dare you question our pricing structure in that sense? And
well, that's
is
your
that,
amygdala,
I guess it's
bro.
just
Your amygdala is whispering in your ear. Anytime anything that's new to you, till you've got your own personal data. As human beings, we're in survival mode is our default mode. And our default mode is our amygdala, which is 75% negative. So something that's new that catches you off guard, that amygdala is going to whisper in your ear. It's an amygdala whisper. And you got to get some experiential data on your own to counter that. Now, look, I got my amygdala whispers in my ear. So, because I'm human. So get some experiential data on your mirrors and other places. I will tell you also, very much like the conversation we just had, we'll get back to you. First of all, learn to recognize what is a maybe. That's a maybe. The choosing not to execute now. Now, let's couple this with people's gut response is to question price. And rarely is it the price.
Mm-hmm.
It's the value, or it's really the value. So somebody says your price is too high. Your response to that is, it seems like the value is just not there for you.
There we go.
Because they may, the gut reaction, you got to get them, they may not know what's wrong until you encourage them out of it with the appropriate label. Their gut instinct might be telling them so you need to articulate exactly what it is. Now, there's a possibility that their counter proposal on adjustment on the value, whether it's delivery terms, anything other than price, might actually make it more profitable for you. Now, it doesn't matter what percentage of time that is. Maybe it's only 1% of the time.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say it's only 1% of the time.
That's better than 0% of the time.
It's better than zero. That's money you're leaving on the table. You got to give them the opportunity to counter propose a deal that actually makes more money for you. And then on top of that, if you get them to counter propose a better deal, you go, wow, brilliant. And then what are the chances that they're going to follow up? Because it was their idea, that darn skippy they're going to follow up. It was their idea. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's that would be my cascade of advice for you on that. And I know eventually, like, this will be out in a video. It'll be linked to our bios. You guys want to go back and review this, because the stream of consciousness that you're getting from me or any of the Black Swans is almost too fast to keep up with. So, go back and review the videos. Take as many notes. Max out the value on this app.
Right on. Thank you. So in closing, bend a little reality.
Who told you how to do that? Where'd you get that idea?
I don't know.
Guys, we're talking about mirrors today. Jedi mind trick. The last 1 to 3 words are the important 1 to 3 words. Listen to these examples to see how crazy it is that this stuff works. The quickest, easiest, simple bailout skill that will never fail you, never fail you. Especially when you're thrown off, when you're off track, when you've lost your emotional bearing. Mirrors are there for you. They work with the least amount of brain power. That's why they're always there for you. So we're preparing for one of these trainings in a very early day. No, it wasn't one of these trainings, but it was our training in our very early days.
Yeah, corporate training.
And we're supposed to put together notebooks. Actually, we're supposed to put together 3-ring binders. But in my head, those terms are synonymous. And he's putting this stuff together, and I asked him if he's got the notebooks ready. And he knows we're supposed to be putting 3-ring binders, and I'm saying notebooks. He doesn't know what's in my head, actually. Are you thinking something like this when I say notebooks? Who knows? Basically. But, this could be this is not a 3-ring binder, is it? This is not a 3-ring binder. I don't know. I don't know what's the matter with him. I don't know why he can't read my mind. But anyway, so I say, are the notebooks ready? And he goes, what do you mean by notebooks? So what do I say? Goddamn notebooks. Yeah, exactly. Goddamn notebooks, right? You say it's much clearer then, right? Because the word notebook is so self-explanatory that if you don't understand exactly what I mean because I choose my words so well, then you're an idiot. It's the same way I ask for directions when I'm in Paris. What do you mean you don't know where the Eiffel Tower? Where's the Eiffel Tower? I only say it again louder. So he mirrors me. He goes, notebooks? I go, yeah, 3-ring binders. And that's why the mirrors are the great bail you out of the corner tool. Somebody's not on the same sheet of music. It's either you or it's them. A quick mirror always causes people to restate it another way. It's especially effective with assertives, because we figure if you're unclear, we just need to talk more.
This is Chris again. Hey, listen, I got a couple of questions I need to ask you. We've got a van out here, a blue and gray van. We've been able to get a handle on the owners of all the vehicles out here, except this one in particular. Do you know anything about it?
Well, other vehicles not out there because you guys chased my driver away.
We chased your driver away?
Well, when he seen the police, he cut.
This mirror tool, one of the negotiation techniques, from the FBI 8, there are 8 specific techniques that we used in hostage negotiation. The mirror tool is one of those ways to innocuously get them to either repeat it or expand on it.
Get them to either repeat it or expand on it?
Right.
Is that what you just said?
Right.
Did I just do it?
You know what? You did. It was perfect.
Okay.
See, and I didn't even notice it. I was just telling you to use it.
That's pretty cool.
I don't know if you felt awkward when you did that because you did it intentionally, but I had no idea that you did it until you told me you did it.
Wow. It was awkward. It was definitely awkward. It felt, contrived. But you didn't pick it. You didn't You didn't feel that at all?
No. I mean, you blew that one by me. You blew it right by me.
I hope you got the idea. Mirrors are simple. The last 1 to 3 words are the important 1 to 3 words. Make a whole day a mirror day. They're easy. Practice them. Get your repetitions in. They're simple. They're a Jedi mind trick. Enjoy using mirrors.
It's very interesting that the meatheads at the FBI were the ones that started trying to listen and empathize and see the other people's perspective.
Right.
Let's get into the book. And I'll tell you what, when I was reading the book, one thing that was a little bit tricky for me is as I was reading the book, I'm like, I want to read a bunch. It's kind of written, I've written a couple books too. And in my books, I tell the story, the combat story, the business story, and then give the principle. And that's what your book is too. There's a lot of that. Hey, here's a combat story, an FBI story, or a business story. And here's the negotiating principle that comes out of it. And I kind of was going back and forth, do I read a bunch of the stories because the stories are great? But I figured since you're here, it'd be great. I'm sure you'll tell some of those stories, but just to get into the techniques, the negotiation techniques that you outline in the book. And that's kind of what I decided to do. May or may not have been the right decision. We're not sure yet. Maybe you'll have to come back just for pure story time. But I wanted to get into the tactics that you talk about because, again, I think they're so prevalent. And in your intro to the book, you talk about negotiation is life. You're negotiating all the time.
Right.
So these are things that everybody can use all the time. And the other thing is kind of like leadership. People think leadership, you either have it or you don't. But really, leadership is a bunch of skills that you can learn.
Right.
And negotiation, how often do you hear, oh, that guy's a great negotiator? You hear that a lot. Or that guy's not a good negotiator. But what you don't realize is negotiation, just like basketball or just like playing guitar, there's a bunch of skills that you can learn. There's a bunch of moves that you can make. And once you know those skills, once you know those moves, you can utilize them. Right. And so this book, awesome book for pointing out some of these tactics, techniques, and procedures. So let's get into a little bit. The first technique that you talk about, or the first one that I'm going to highlight, is called mirroring.
Yeah.
And you say mirroring, also called isopraxism. Is that right?
It's a lot of syllables in that word.
There you go. Well, luckily you've only got it in here once. I don't have to say it again. Is essentially imitation. It's another neurobehavior that humans and other animals display in which we copy each other to comfort each other. It can be done with speech patterns, body language, vocabulary, tempo, tone of voice. It's generally an unconscious behavior. We're rarely aware of when it's happening, but it's a sign that people are bonding in sync and establishing the kind of rapport that leads to trust. It's a phenomenon and now a technique that follows a very basic but profound biological principle. We fear what's different and are drawn to what's similar. As the saying goes, birds of a feather flock together. Mirroring, then, when practiced consciously, is the art of insinuating similarity. Trust me, a mirror signals to another unconscious, you and I, we're alike. Once you're attuned to the dynamic, you'll see it everywhere. Couples walking on the street with their steps in perfect synchronicity. Friends in conversation at a park, both nodding their head and crossing legs at about the same time. These people, in a word, are connected. While mirroring is most often associated with forms of nonverbal communication, especially body language, as negotiators, a mirror focuses on the words and nothing else. Not the body language, not the accent, not the tone or delivery, just the words. It's almost laughably simple. For the FBI, a mirror is when you repeat the last 3 words or the critical 1 to 3 words of what someone just said. Of the entirety of the FBI's hostage negotiation skill set, mirroring is the closest one gets to a Jedi mind trick. Simple, yet uncannily effective. By repeating back what people say, you trigger this mirroring instinct, and your counterpart will inevitably elaborate on what was just said and sustain the process of connecting. Psychologist Richard Wiseman created a study using waiters to identify what was more effective What the more effective method of creating a connection with strangers? Mirroring or positive reinforcement. One group of waiters using positive reinforcement lavished praise and encouragement on patrons using the words such as great, no problem, and sure in response to each order. The other group of waiters mirrored their customers simply by repeating their orders back to them. The results were stunning. The average tip of the waiters who mirrored was 70% more than those who used positive reinforcement. So that's pretty amazing.
It's nuts, isn't it? Yeah.
You point out later in the book that it can feel weird to mirror when you first start doing it.
Yeah, it feels weird to everybody, pretty much. Yeah, it feels weird to everybody. And I don't know why that is. Maybe because it seems so obvious to the user. I mean, like
seems obvious.
Yeah, I feel like saying some more based on you doing that. I don't know what it is. Yeah, it's just, and that's one of the ones, again, I was talking about Huberman before. Like, if I could get him to do a ton of experiments, like try this, try this, try this, I got to find out this. And that'd be one of them as to what makes a mirror work so effectively with so many people. And it does. Mm-hmm. And then who's attracted to it? I find interesting who's attracted to it. And then I also find it's different circuits in the brain. Like the majority of the people on my team, we get really good at labeling. And I find as a performance skill, then in myself and others, we might not mirror enough. And then those that are really attracted to mirroring and will use it almost exclusively. Like, what is it that makes you tick, that makes you like that mirroring so much? And I think they're attracted to the simplicity of it, and then they're not offended by simple concepts, which actually in many cases takes a more sophisticated approach to really like simple stuff. And I'm seeing regularly people that really mirroring is a sophisticated skill, and if somebody rejects it off the top of their head, I think you're worried about appearing stupid. And if you're so confident in your intelligence that you got no problem looking stupid, then you're happy to mirror.
Got it. One piece of advice that I give to people is when Chris rolls into my office and you're pissed about something, I got to talk to you right now. One thing I tell people is like, cool, I get out my notebook, get out my pen, and like, well, what's going on, Chris? Talk to me. And to me, that's showing you that I'm listening to what you have to say and I'm taking it seriously. And it seems like mirroring is another way of doing it. If you're repeating what I'm saying, then I'm like, oh, he's paying attention to me. He's listening to me. You're proving that you're listening to the person, which also is a really positive thing. Never mind the whole psychological connection that we're making. Just the fact that when I'm repeating what you're saying back to you, it shows you I'm listening to what you're saying.
Right.
I often, when I talk about listening and how important it is, people don't realize how important it is. And I think one of the ways that I use to explain how important it is I use the opposite, which is if you're talking and I cut you off, everyone knows that's disrespectful. Everybody knows it. It's like a sign of disrespect. If someone's talking, I jump in there and cut them off. Oh, you're not listening to me. That's being disrespectful. The opposite of that is when I actually listen to what you have to say. And now we've got a little technique to prove to you that I'm listening to what you say. I'm going to mirror those last couple words back to you.
Because there's no doubt that you got the words if you repeat them back.
Nice little technique. Moving on a little bit.
Real estate is the investment vehicle that's made more ordinary people wealthy than anything else. Keith Weinhold of Get Rich Education is host of one of America's top investing shows, Disrupting Wall Street. He's an international best-selling author and has been an active income property investor since 2002. He has created thousands in passive monthly income for countless followers, and now he has a free book, The 7 Principles for Creating Wealth in Your Life. Get your copy now at getricheducation.com/book. That's getricheducation.com/book. Because invest in what produces income for you now and later. Keith Weinhold is your guy. Sign up now at getricheducation.com/book.
You're listening to the show that's created financial freedom for busy people just like you. This is Get Rich Education. I'm your host, Keith Weinhold. We're talking with Chris Voss, the author of the mega popular book, Never Split the Difference. We're talking about negotiation, since that's such a critical part of real estate investing. And there are certain techniques in negotiations that some might want to employ. These even have names because they're so well known. Chris, I know you like to employ the technique of mirroring. So tell us about mirroring. What is that, and how does that give one an advantage?
Yeah, the hostage negotiators mirror, the business negotiators mirror, the Black Swan negotiators mirror. You know, it's not the body language thing that everybody's familiar with. You know, it's not they put their hand to their chin, you put your hand to their chin. You know, they lean to the left, you lean to the left. It's not a body language nonsense. It's a repetition of 1 to 3-ish words. You teach yourself the skill repeating the last 1 to 3 words of what they just said. When you have done that enough times, then you move it around. You get surgical with your mirror. You mirror what you want to hear more about. It's a great skill that does 2 things simultaneously. It gets the other side talking, gets them to expand. It's much better than what did you mean by that? Much better. You get a much cleaner download of their actual thoughts. It's also a great skill when you are caught off guard. Like they just said something that just doesn't make sense that your brain has just stopped. If you practice the mirror, it's a great way to buy yourself a whole bunch of time to get your feet back under you. The other side doesn't know you did it because they feel like you're really listening and they want to talk some more. The funny thing about the mirror that I have found really interesting is the few people that are both high IQ and high EQ, and I'm not high IQ. And EQ is learnable. I believe, I work very hard at my EQ. But the natural born high IQ, high EQ people love mirrors. I think it's because it's so simple and it's so effective. And that type of person loves simplicity and effectiveness combined into one. And I've seen consistently the smartest negotiators, very high IQ people love to mirror all the time, which I get a kick out of because, I just do it because I was taught that it worked. Wasn't that quickly attracted to it till I see really smart people. So I pretend I'm really smart by doing it.
All right, so we're talking about EQ, emotional intelligence, and the technique of mirroring that you use in negotiation. So, for example, if you've got the $500,000 fourplex building you're looking to sell, I want to buy it, say I'm interested in price, I might try to break you down and say something like, well, it looks like the roof only has 5 years of life expectancy left on it. What would you say?
All right, so I'm selling. And you're questioning the roof and you want me to mirror?
Yeah.
Well, I would say 5 years of life expectancy.
Yeah, I'm afraid in 5 years, that's going to wipe out my cash flow for an entire year when I have to replace that roof.
For an entire year?
Yeah, an entire year of my cash flow just 5 years away. So since it's a 30-year roof, can't you share in the expense with me?
Share in the expense?
Yeah, share in the expense of the roof that you haven't replaced.
Sounds like if we work that out, all the other terms would work for you.
Maybe they would, depending on what we agree to on the new roof and how much we're going to share in this expense that I'd be burdened with if I buy the building.
So you're not worried about how much I'm burdened?
You're burdened?
Now you're trying to mirror me back.
No, but you know what? You did something interesting there when you mirrored me a few times, Chris. You got me to say something I didn't plan to say. Maybe you thought that I wanted the entire roof replaced, but after a couple questions, you got me to use the word share. You actually got me down to where now you knew that I was willing to share in the cost of that new roof. And then you knew I wasn't asking you to replace the entire thing. So you actually did manipulate me. Manipulation is probably not the right word, but you did get me to concede when you mirrored me a couple times. And the only reason I mirrored you is because you told me about the technique. So that was really great how you got
Let me stop you for just a second too, because all right, so my observation of your tone was that you didn't feel backed into a corner. Have I got that wrong?
You're right. I was being kind of aggressive and going for something.
What I was trying to do is, see, the dynamic was we got into a sharing conversation without counteroffers, without argument, without anybody getting upset. I'm creating a collaborative environment here so that I can get you into this idea without you feeling like you got backed into a corner or drug into it. That's what I'm really trying to do. I'm trying to expand the conversation. What we would have seen before is bargaining, offer, counteroffer, accusations, all this kind of stuff, meet in the middle, all this other nonsense. I'm trying to take the conversation into an area that's collaborative, but you not feeling backed into the corner. Because if I cause you to feel backed into a corner by taking you there, even if I come out on top, quote, on top in this point, you're going to want to get me back elsewhere. And the fear of loss that you talked about before, we got to get people back at least at a 2-to-1 rate of return to feel even. Danny Kahneman, Nobel Prize winner, behavioral economics, prospect theory, lost things twice as much as an equivalent gain. So if I get you to make a $5,000 concession, you're not going to feel whole until you've gotten me for 10 someplace else on the 2-to-1 feeling of loss.
Interesting.
That's the hard part about bargaining and conceding, was because we're human beings. It will never feel equitable. And it causes a downward spiral. I want to stay out of that. I don't want to go there. I don't want to trigger enough that's going to get triggered by accident. If we got to get into a back and forth exchange, now I got to worry about how much resentment am I going to trigger, where you're going to pay me back, which is maybe you don't pay me back on price. Maybe on something comes up in an inspection nobody foresaw. Maybe something's wrong with the property nobody foresaw. Maybe, that no real estate transaction, just because you got a signed contract, does that mean you're going to close?